Hello guys, welcome to Sociology revision session for civil services exams. So here in this session, we are going to talk about backward classes and Dalit movements. So here, what's the idea about this revision session is once you've completed the topic, then only you attend the session. If you have already done with the topic and if you're taking test series and if you're revising this topic, the backward classes and Dalit movements, this is going to be useful because what all things I'm discussing in this session, I'll briefly mention one-liner, right? The important areas that you need to cover for your exam. So that will be a revision for you. It cannot cover the syllabus actually. Okay, so in case if you're missing something in your notes and if you're getting some new inputs from this session, update your notes with that, the thinkers and the perspectives that I'm using here. So I cover everything, in a systematic way, and the structure is something which you can follow. If you get a 20 marker, and you need to write everything that I'm mentioning here in a balanced form. If it's a specific question, again, from this, you can get specific questions also that accordingly you need to plan for 10 marker. Okay. So the structure will be like this. We will first give an introduction. And in that you talk about, understanding the backward classes and Dalit movement. Explain what is backward class, what is Dalit, who, contribute to the backward class, who are Dalits, and then talk about the sociological relevance and historical context. So a couple of lines, you need to write the introduction. Then you need to discuss who is a Dalit, right? You can talk about origin of the term Dalit. You can talk about contributions of Jyotiba, Phule, and Ambedkar. You can talk about Max Weber's perspective on group consciousness to add a foreign thinker here, and then define, or you can talk about definitions from colonial and modern context as well. Then we talk about, who are backward class. Again, definition of scope, evolution of the term backward class, Béteille insight on caste and class hierarchies. So these are what I'll be discussing, and then we will discuss the regional variations in backward class movement. In North India, we talk about, weakened caste hierarchies, the post-Bhakti movement and Islamic rule, economic dominance of Jats, Vaishyas, and Ashraf Muslims, right? And then Ashraf is a higher caste in the Muslims, okay? So if you talk about South India, again, rigid caste stratification and the Brahminical dominance. We talk about educational disparities and the rise of non-Brahmin movements. We discuss about M.S.A on regional differences in mobilization, and then the type of backward class movement. The classification by M.S.A, Brahmins versus non-Brahmins. So that one group at the top, and this is anti-Brahminical movement. And then Brahmins and upper non-Brahmins, that is Brahmin, Kshatriya, and then below that, rest of them. And then Dalit, the Avarna, the untouchable versus others, the radical movements and the caste withdrawal and everything. So if you see the major Dalit movement, Satya, Shodhak, Samaj, where we discuss the role of Jyotiba, Phule, contribution to the Dalit identity, and then self-respect movement. Here we discuss E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, the Periyar, and then anti-Brahmin and anti-Hindu ideologies, and Dalit Panther Movement, inspired by Black Panther Movement in USA, and emphasis on cultural identity and resistance here. Then if you look at the sociological perspective, this is something which we need to give a lot of importance, and we need to write these. Gail Omvedt, social revolution through Dalit movements, that concept we need to see. And then M.S.A, transition from reformative to revolutionary movements, and T.K. Uman, the progressive modernity. Harold Gould, right, comparison to working class mobilization. M.S.A, conflict over Sanskritization. And then we also need to discuss a contemporary backward class in Dalit movements. In fact, that can be a separate 10 marker, contemporary backward class movement or the Dalit movements. So impact of Mandal Commission, you can discuss. Rise of Bahujan Samaj Party, BSP, horizontal and vertical mobilization, you can discuss. And the challenges, the caste-based violence, right? That caste conflict you study separately in another chapter also in paper 2. Here we just need to mention about that. Economic exclusion, elite capture of political representation. What's the way forward? Strengthening the affirmative action. Don't talk about reservation, write in affirmative action, okay? And then empowering the grassroots movement, addressing the cultural prejudices, and conclude by saying the significance of backward class and Dalit movement and its sociological implication and the path to inclusivity. So this is the structure, and this is the area that you need to focus. This is how balanced you need to write your answer. If it is a 20 marker, all these content should be there. So we can discuss this in detail. I'll take some 15 minutes. Remember, guys, I used to take 2 sessions for this topic. So this is not the actual class to cover this topic. So I'm expecting that you have already attended my course or any other mentors, or you have covered this topic, and then you're attending the session. If not, take the PDF, the link and the details are given in the description. You can get it for free of cost. Read that, understand things, and take it as a revision session. If you're looking for course or test series or any mentorship program, check out the details in the description. So let's start this. How can you give an introduction? See, you can say the movements of backward classes and Dalits in India that represent the enduring struggles of marginalized communities against the structural inequalities. Right, so you're bringing in that marginalized community, you're talking about structural inequalities, and you can say these movements are deeply sociological, and that's offering insight into caste-based oppression, social mobility, political empowerment, all these dimensions you can discuss. So we will be talking about that. That's how you will be introducing, right? And we will also, look at the contemporary dimensions as we have discussed the backward classes and the Dalit movement, right? In fact, these have enriched the sociological perspectives also. Now, define who's Dalit. So the term Dalit, that's derived from the Sanskrit root dal, meaning broken or oppressed, DAL, right? And that symbolizes a collective identity of communities historically subjected to untouchability. Over a period of time, various reformers, and scholars have used the term to represent these marginalized groups. So Jyotiba Phule, if you see, used Adi Shudras and Dalit to refer the oppressed caste. So he emphasized their historical oppression by Brahminical structures. And J.J. Molesworth mentioned the term Dalit and in his Marathi English Dictionary 1831, and that's marking one of the earliest usage. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar focused on creating a unified identity for Dalit to mobilize them against caste-based oppression, and his usage of the term carried a political and emancipatory tone. So you don't want to mention all these, you can just mention Dalit, in fact, means simply oppressed. If you want any one of this, you can mention. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar will be a better choice also for you. Now, sociologist Max Weber provided a framework for understanding such identities, emphasizing the role of subjective belief in shared descent and historical experiences in shaping group consciousness. We discussed this in paper 1 when we talked about caste, class, status, party. Okay, so now who are backward classes? Guys, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya. Below this is commonly known as backward classes. So basically, Shudras. And then when you talk about Dalit, that is also coming under backward class, but Dalits we study separately. So the term backward classes that encompasses all socially and economically disadvantaged groups, including scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes. So when I talk about backward class, it's whoever is below the forward class, right? Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, below that, whoever is there, socially, economically disadvantaged group. So that include the, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudras, or the OBCs, and then other backward caste, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and all those. So British administration referred to them as depressed classes. That's a term formalized in colonial policies. And the Supreme Court later clarified that classes could be equated with caste. That's reinforcing the connection between social stratification and economic deprivation. Andre Béteille observes that backward classes in India reflect not only economic disparities but also cultural and symbolic hierarchies that entrenched in caste systems. Now, if you look at the regional differences in backward class movements, so the intensity and nature of backward class movements vary across regions. Now, if you see North India, there is a weakened caste hierarchies, in fact, influenced by the Bhakti movement and the Islamic rule. Caste hierarchies in North India were less rigid, and dominant economic groups like Jats and Vaishyas often overshadowed Brahmins in secular power structure. Right, status-wise, Brahmins may be at the top, but when it comes to the power structure, Jats and Vaishyas, in fact, overshadowed the Brahmins. And there is a dispersed inequality. Unlike in the South, inequality was not concentrated within a single group, and that reducing the impetus for a unified movement also. So the inequality is actually dispersed across the groups. It's not confined to a single group. But if you look at South India, there is a cumulative stratification. Brahmins dominated both secular and ritual hierarchies. So Brahmins are wealthier, Brahmins having the lands and everything. And ritual hierarchies also, status-wise and everywhere, Brahmins are superior when it comes to South India. So there is a cumulative stratification is what you see over there. Educational disparities. In the Madras presidency, if you see South India, that encompasses Kerala, Tamil Nadu, parts of, Karnataka. Brahmins constituted 3% of the population, but held 66% of graduate degrees. And then backward class movement, if you see, are focused on countering Brahminical hegemony here. So that is as seen in the Justice Party and Dravidian movements. And that we can discuss. M.S.A. Rao, he highlighted these regional variations and emphasizing that the movements in South India were more confrontational due to Brahminical dominance across multiple domains. So there was a mobilization which was easily possible, unlike North India, where you see dispersed inequality. So let's talk about the types of backward class movement. Here, we'll bring in M.S.A. Rao, categorize the backward caste movement into three types. So guys, get the PDF. Complete details are there. That is free of cost. Check out the details in the description, download it and prepare that. That covers everything. Okay, whatever. And then you can add also from the lecture. That is how this lecture is going to be helpful to you. Otherwise, this is of no use. It is going to be very difficult because most of the things may be new to you. If you've already covered the topics, then it is going to be perfect. Consider it as a revision session. That's what I'm repeating again. If you're here to cover the topic, it is going to be slightly difficult as I only quickly go through that. For example, now I'm going to talk about the three categories. Here, Brahmin versus non-Brahmin. So this is predominantly South India, Justice Party and Dravidian movements. So here, united Shudras and Dalits against Brahminical hegemony. So this is completely Brahmins on one side, others on the other side. So everyone again united against the Brahminical hegemony, Brahminical dominance. So that is one type of movement. And then you see Brahmins and upper non-Brahmins. Brahmins, the others are non-Brahmins, but here upper non-Brahmins means Kshatriya, Vaishya versus lower others. Okay, so here it is basically represented by the OBC movement seeking socio-political representation. Then comes Dalit, who are out of the Varna structure, the untouchables versus all. These are radical movements led by the Dalit themselves. These are pure Dalit movement. So if the question is about Dalit movement, which one will come? Dalit versus all. This is Dalit movement. This is pure Dalit movement. Previous cases also, Dalits were part of it, but that's not pure Dalit movement. You can say Brahmins versus non-Brahmin, Brahmins versus OBCs. Now this is pure Dalit movement. Okay, so you can talk about Louis Dumont explained this division through his theory of homo hierarchicus. We discussed this, in detail, where the caste relations are inherently hierarchical, but the dynamic, allowing for contestation and resistance. Now, if you look at the major Dalit movements, okay, so we can talk about Satya Shodhak Samaj, a truth-seeking society, right, founded by Jyotiba Phule, 1873. Go through that in detail. It can be a separate question also, and advocated for Shudra and Arti Shudra unity, criticizing Brahminical dominance, and emphasized secular education, Vidya, over religious scriptures, Shastra. Okay, now Gail Omvedt, you can discuss a perspective, note that Phule's movement laid the groundwork for modern Dalit consciousness by combining anti-caste rhetoric with strategies for socio-economic upliftment. So Gail Omvedt, you can mention, check out the PDF, details are there, more elaboration is there. Coming to self-respect movement, it was led by E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, Periyar in Tamil Nadu, and that again challenged the Brahminical supremacy and emphasized women's rights, family planning, and rationalism. This transitioned into Dravida Kazhagam, and that's focusing on anti-Brahmin and anti-Hindu ideologies as well. So here you can discuss M.N. Srinivas. M.N. Srinivas argued that self-respect movement, countered the monopolization of Sanskritization by Brahmins, promoting secular empowerment among the non-Brahmins also. So guys, I'm only talking about one thing here, but in the PDF that you can download for free of cost, everything is there in detail, and based on your choice, you can add. But I'm taking one because to substantiate one point that I'm mentioning, I just need one only. So the best one is what I'm taking here, but you have choices to take based on your choice also. But this is my preference, okay? Coming to Dalit Panther Movement, that's inspired by Black Panther Movement in US, and it emerged in Maharashtra in 1970s. That's focused on creating an alternative cultural identity for Dalits, in fact, by highlighting systemic oppression and discrimination. If you look at the sociological perspective again on Dalit and backward class movement, you can talk about Gail Omvedt views Dalit movement as catalyst for social revolution and emphasizes the distinction between incidentally poor and historically marginalized groups, asserting that the Dalit mobilization addresses deep-seated structural inequalities. So Gail Omvedt, you can discuss in the context of Dalit movement. Andre Béteille, you can discuss analyzes the transition from socio-religious reform to political assertion in backward class movement. And he argues that such movements reflect the interplay of caste and class dynamics. M.S.A. Rao, already we discussed, he identifies Dalit movements as revolutionary, contrasting earlier reformist caste movement types, and highlights their role in reshaping India's socio-political fabric. T.K. Women, a very important thing that we use in across, whether it is regionalism, communalism, any sociological topic for that matter, if you take from paper 2, you will be using. Right. So here he interprets movements like self-respect movement as effort to establish progressive modernity among the marginalized groups. Then Harald Gault, right? So he compares Dalit mobilization to working class movements driven by ideology and self respect rather than immediate material gains. Now, guys, whenever you talk about any social movement, remember it's a collective action. So you need to talk about ideology used, whether it is Marxist, liberal, or radical, or Gandhian ideology. You need to talk about the leadership of each of these movements, whether it is coming from within or outside, right? You need to talk about the organization. So all these dimensions, the method, right? The method that they have used and everything. So these are there in your answer for sure. That I'm not discussing here. I'm just giving you the main points. Now, this can be a separate question, guys. They can also ask you contemporary backward class and Dalit movements. Otherwise, also you need to add, if the question is asked in 20 marker, in general, you need to bring about this. Post-Mandal Commission era, OBC representation increased, but Sanskritization declined. Then the movement shifted focus on cultural assimilation to political empowerment, right? And then Bahujan Samaj Party, you can talk about, found by Kanshiram and later led by Mayawati. Combine the Dalit and OBC interest through social engineering, talk about horizontal mobilization and vertical mobilization, right? How Brahmins and Dalits together they got mobilized. So then the challenges like economic marginalization still persist, with benefits of political representation often limited to the elite sections. And then talk about the challenges and the way forward. What are the main challenges? Caste-based violence. So whatever you have studied in caste conflict, you can bring in here the perspective and everything based on the demand of the question. Couple of lines is enough. You don't want to study for this topic separately. So you talk about Dalit continue to face atrocities. That is reflecting the persistent social inequalities. So you studied over there, right? Ethnic conflict and caste conflict. Bring in that, mention it here. And then elite capture, right? You can talk about political and economic gains are often, in fact, confined to small sections of backward classes and Dalits. And then the economic exclusion. That's again a problem, landlessness and lack of access to quality education and economic activities that hinder the upward mobility, right? And then what's the way forward? Talk about strengthening affirmative action, expand access to education, healthcare, employment, political representation, and other things. Grassroots mobilization is required. Empower the marginalized communities to assert their rights. Cultural change. So you need to address the deep-rooted caste prejudices through education and awareness campaign. So these are the areas that you need to cover. So guys, if you get a question on 20 marker, you need to write everything in a balanced format. Whatever I have discussed, you cannot afford to miss anything because that's the structure that you need to follow. For that particular question, whatever is required is there, including sociological perspective, the movements and everything. Okay, you need to add the level of organization, the ideologies and the leadership and other things in the answer. Otherwise, it's a perfect one. You need to make some more elaboration based on the demand of the question. If it's a 10 marker specific question, then demand of the question is what matters. So you need to add the content based on that because hardly you can write 125, 130 words. Now, how can you conclude? Backward class and Dalit movements have profoundly shaped India's social and political landscape. From Phule's Satya Shodhak Samaj to Dalit Panther Movement, which is a violent movement, these struggles embody the fight for dignity, equality, and justice. So we discussed about sociologists like Omvedt, Béteille. They remind us that while progress has been made, much remains to be done. Still, there are a lot to be done. Still, there are a lot of challenges. So we discussed that in way forward. So true empowerment, if you want to see, it's actually lies in addressing the structural inequalities. That's what we started off with in introduction, and fostering a society that values inclusivity and fairness. So something like this, you can write in your conclusion and conclude your answer with a very good positive note, with a proper suggestion that makes it a very good sociological and valid, a rounded, well thoughtful answer. So that's how you'll fetch the mark. So add all these contents. If you're missing anything in your notes, add this, but these are general and I don't think that you'll be missing. There's a topic that every teacher cover in this way. So guys, if you like the video, share it with your friends also. And in case if you're looking for any test series or mentorship or course, check out the details in the description and get in touch with me. So see you guys in the next session. Thank you so much. So if you go for a quick recap, we have introduced, we discussed who's Dalit, we discussed different perspectives, contributions of Phule, Ambedkar, Max Weber's definition and perspectives, and then we discussed backward class, Andre Béteille's insight on that, and then we discussed the regional variation, South India, North India, and then we discussed the types of backward class movement, M.S.A, Brahmins, non-Brahmins, Brahmin and upper non-Brahmin versus others, Dalit versus all. That's a pure Dalit movement. And we discuss a major Dalit movement like Satya Shodhak Samaj, self-respect movement, Dalit Panther movement. We discuss a sociological perspective, Gail Omvedt, M.S.A, T.K. Uman, Harold Gault, and M.S.A, right? So, and then we discuss a contemporary backward class and Dalit movements, impact of Mandal Commission, rise of BSP, horizontal vertical mobilization, and other aspect. We discuss the challenges, the caste-based violence, economic exclusion, elite capture of political representation, the way forward as strengthening affirmative action, empowering grassroots movement, and addressing cultural prejudices. And we concluded. So this is how your answer should look like. So guys, that's about this session. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.